Before the world knew names, before stone held the stories of kings, there was a land shaped by mist and memory. They called it Tarn, a vast continent where forests breathed, rivers remembered, and the wind carried tales older than language itself. Here, civilizations would one day rise, but in the beginning, there were only the clans. They didn't build cities or crown rulers. They lived by custom, endurance, and the echoes of their ancestors. Among them were the people of Dravar, not conquerors, but survivors. They dwelled where stone met fog, where trees grew twisted by relentless winds, and where fire was a sacred tool, not a simple comfort. They wore what the land gave them, bone shaped into symbols of their lineage, metal reclaimed from the earth's deep veins, and cloth woven by hand and time. For the Dravar, the body was a responsibility. Strength was cultivated in quiet labor, and silence was respected. For they believed the land itself was always listening. Their ancestors were laid to rest not as a burial, but as a return to the earth, their bodies feeding the ancient trees. Life, to them, was a circle, and war was never worshipped. It was endured. Beyond the rugged lands of Drar lay three great realms, not empires of conquest, but kingdoms of balance, each shaped by a different way of life. To the south, across sun-drenched plains, lived the Lions of Helier, masters of open spaces, guided by honor, structure, and unwavering tradition. Their society was a marvel of discipline and order. To the east rose the Garn clans, a people as strong and patient as the mountains they called home, their lives carved into stone terraces and winding mountain paths. And to the far north, beyond deep rivers and ancient woods, dwelled the Ursavile quiet, enduring, and bound by oaths as old as the peaks themselves. For generations, an unspoken peace held these realms in harmony. Borders were respected, trade flowed like the great rivers, and old conflicts faded into stories told by elders around a flickering fire. The world, it seemed, had learned a profound stillness, or so it believed. Change did not arrive with the roar of thunder or the clash of steel. It came as a whisper, a creeping silence. Travelers began to vanish along well-trodden routes. Watchfires on distant hills went unanswered. Messages, once carried by swift runners, simply stopped arriving. At first, it was blamed on the unpredictability of the weather, then on simple misfortune. But then, one morning, a fog settled over the lowlands, a fog that was unnaturally thick, and it did not lift with the rising sun. And from this eerie mist, figures emerged. Lions of Helier, armored and expressionless, their movements precise and coordinated. They carried weapons, but no banners. They spoke no challenge, offered no warning. They moved not with the heat of rage, but with a cold, terrifying purpose. And they crossed a border that had stood untouched for centuries. The Dravar did not see them coming. There were no horns to announce an army, no war cries to shatter the morning calm. Only the soft, rhythmic sound of armored feet moving through mist. By the time the first alarm fires were lit, casting a desperate glow against the gray shroud, the invaders were already among the outer settlements. This was not a border dispute. This was not a misunderstanding. This was an act of absolute calculated force. The Dravar, caught by surprise, defended their homes not with fury, but with the quiet, unyielding resolve of a people who knew the cost of survival. The clash that followed was brief, chaotic, and utterly devastating. By sunrise, the mist no longer carried the scent of morning dew. It carried ash. The old balance of Tarn, a peace that had lasted for generations, was broken in a single brutal morning. A single question echoed through the shattered settlements, a question no one could answer. Why? The Lions of Helier, the very symbol of order and stability, had kept the peace longer than any kingdom in living memory. Their laws were firm, their councils measured and deliberate. Yet no declaration of war had been made, no warning given. Messengers sent to the grand city of Helier to demand an explanation never returned. A chilling silence was the only reply. Rumors, like poison, began to spread through the lands. Some claimed the esteemed Lion Council had fallen, overthrown from within. Others whispered of a shadow influence, a force older than the kingdoms themselves, that now pulled the strings of the once noble lions. For the first time in generations, a primal fear returned to the heart of Tarn. The Dravar did not seek revenge. They were not a people driven by blind hatred. They sought truth. Their elders gathered beneath the gnarled branches of the oldest trees, and stories long forbidden were spoken again in hushed, urgent tones. Tales of a time before the peace, before borders were drawn in the dust. A time when Tarn nearly tore itself apart. They spoke of a darkness that had once been defeated, a malevolent will that had been sealed away. Something had been awakened, and it was now moving through the kingdoms like a slow, silent fire, consuming everything in its path. As weeks turned into months, the disturbance spread. The Goran clans, hearing of the unprovoked attack, fortified their mountain passes, their trust in the old ways shattered. The Ursa Vale, mysterious and withdrawn, closed its borders entirely, retreating into its forested domain. The web of trade that had connected the realms for centuries collapsed. Trust, the invisible thread that held their world together, vanished. Small, bitter conflicts began to ignite along old fault lines, old rivalries flaring back to life. Not because of hatred, but because fear demands answers, and answers were nowhere to be found. The silence from Helier was an open wound, and in its absence, suspicion became the new currency of the land. Deep within the jagged peaks of the Panic Mountains, a place few dared to tread, lay something forgotten. A ruin older than any of the kingdoms, older than written history itself. There, a hidden relic had been disturbed. It was not a weapon of forged steel, but something far more dangerous, a voice, a psychic force that whispered promises of absolute certainty, that offered an end to all doubt, that promised perfect order in a chaotic world. It was a power that stripped away choice and replaced it with conviction. And in the heart of Helier, someone had listened. Someone had embraced this terrible gift. The kingdoms of Tarn now stood at a crossroads. They could retreat into isolation, strengthening their walls and praying the storm would pass them by, or they could face the encroaching darkness together. Secret delegations were formed. Envoys from the Goran and Ursa clans met with the scattered survivors of Dravar in hidden groves, old enmities set aside in the face of a common threat. For the first time in centuries, the people of Tarn remembered why unity had once been necessary. They remembered the ancient stories. Because some forces do not conquer with armies and swords. They conquer with belief. And a war for the very soul of their world had just begun. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next chapter of our story.